diving into what's called imposter syndrome today.
Yeah, that's it. You've got it. And the sources you sent are really interesting, a lot to work with here. And the big takeaway is that this imposter syndrome thing, it's more than just, those times you doubt yourself a bit. It's this really deep, like ingrained feeling that you're a fraud, professionally or intellectually. You fear that no matter what you've achieved, you're fooling everyone. And at some point, the truth is going to come out. That's the worry.
Exactly. It can be quite a heavy thing to carry around. So we're going to use everything you sent us to try and get a real understanding of this experience, like from the inside out. What we want to look at is where these feelings come from, how they actually show up in your everyday life, and most importantly, what are some practical ways to deal with it. This isn't just about slapping a label on a feeling. It's about understanding something a lot of people go through that can have a real impact, both on your work and your well-being. So how about we go back to the beginning? Where did this whole idea of imposter syndrome even come from?
Good place to start. The sources you sent take us back to the 1970s, to some really groundbreaking work by Clance and Imes. What's interesting is who they focused on initially. Women who were really high achievers. These are people who are objectively successful, but they always said their accomplishments were due to things outside of themselves, pure luck or being good at, like, tricking people. They didn't actually credit their own talent and hard work.
It's really interesting when you think about it that way. When you consider that initial focus, I'm curious, what are your thoughts? Have you ever noticed if this shows up more in certain groups of people? Or maybe even had your own assumptions about who might be more likely to feel this way? Because let's be honest, it's definitely not the same as just feeling a little nervous before a big presentation. It seems so much deeper than that, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And your sources are really clear on this. It's not just a fleeting moment of self-doubt. It's this really deep-seated, persistent feeling of being a fraud. This unshakable belief that you're not worthy of your success, that you're constantly one slip up away from everyone finding out you're not good enough.
It's like you're trapped in this constant internal battle with yourself.
Mm.
So let's talk about how this actually plays out in someone's work life. What are some of the signs that tell us it's more than just typical self-doubt?
It's a multifaceted thing, that's for sure. Emotionally, there's this lack of real confidence in your skills and your ability to do your job well. And often this goes hand in hand with being super sensitive to even tiny mistakes. What most people see as a normal part of learning and growing professionally is seen as proof that they're not good enough. And what's interesting, as your sources point out, is that feeling anxious can be triggered by both success and the possibility of failure. With success, there's this fear that expectations will get even higher and that you won't be able to keep up. And then failure, of course, just strengthens the belief that you're a fraud. It's a tough spot to be in.
It's like a no-win situation in your own mind. So moving away from the internal feelings, how does imposter syndrome show up in people's behavior? What would someone observing from the outside notice?
The behaviors are really telling. One common one is burnout from just working too much all the time. This comes from a deep need to prove yourself, to make up for those feelings of not being good enough. It's not about the actual workload. It's about putting in the extra hours, the extra effort, because you're terrified of being exposed. And another thing you see a lot is downplaying achievements. Success is always because of luck, good timing, other people's help, anything but recognizing your own ability and intelligence. This stops you from actually feeling good about your successes and building real self-esteem. It's like you're fighting against any evidence that you might actually be competent.
Yeah, like actively rejecting proof that you're good at what you do. What else did you find in the material about noticeable behaviors?
Well, this intense fear of being found out, which we've talked about a bit, can lead to all sorts of coping mechanisms. One is isolating yourself. You're afraid that if you get too close to coworkers, they'll see that you're not who they think you are. And then there's perfectionism, setting crazy high standards for yourself. It's this idea that if you can just be perfect, then maybe you can finally feel like you're good enough. But obviously that's impossible, and any little mistake just makes those negative feelings worse. Negative self-talk becomes constant. This inner critic just keeps putting you down. Procrastination, surprisingly, is another one. The fear of not meeting those high standards can be so overwhelming that you just put things off and then end up scrambling at the last minute, which ironically just makes you feel even more like an imposter. And lastly, there's this difficulty accepting praise. Compliments are dismissed, played down, seen as just being polite, rather than someone genuinely recognizing your abilities.
Wow, it's pretty exhausting just listening to all of that. You can really see how much of a struggle it is. You mentioned the difference between imposter syndrome and healthy self-doubt earlier. Could we dig into that a little more? How can someone tell if it's normal to think, I could have done that better, versus this more intense feeling of being a fraud?
That's a really important point to understand. Your sources are really clear that some self-doubt is actually normal and can even be a good thing. It can push you to grow, to look at yourself honestly and figure out where you can improve and keep learning and getting better. The difference with imposter syndrome is how strong and constant these feelings are. They're always there, and they don't go away even when you have proof that you're good at what you do. The biggest difference is not being able to accept success. With normal self-doubt, you can see areas to improve, but you also recognize your achievements and what you're good at. But imposter syndrome, success feels like a fluke, or you don't see it as real proof of your abilities.
That difference is really key. It's not about questioning yourself every now and then. It's this fundamental disconnect between how you feel inside and what's actually happening in your life. You also sent some sources that talk about these different imposter archetypes. That sounds pretty interesting. Can you tell us more about those?
Yeah, Dr. Valerie Young came up with these 5 common imposter archetypes, and they're really helpful in understanding all the different ways imposter syndrome can show up. Think of them as variations on that same basic feeling of being a phony. First, you've got the perfectionist. For them, anything less than perfect is a complete failure. Even small imperfections are seen as proof that they're not good enough. Then there's the expert. They feel like a fake if they don't know everything about something before they even start. They have to keep learning more and more and feel exposed if they don't have all the answers. The natural genius measures their worth by how easily they can learn something new. If it takes effort, they see it as a failure because they think real talent should come naturally. The soloist believes they have to do everything themselves. Asking for help is seen as weakness and makes them feel even more like a fraud. And finally, there's the super person. This type feels like they have to be amazing at every role in their life at work, as a parent, a partner, everything. If they feel like they're not perfect in any area, they feel like a fake.
Those descriptions are spot on. As you were describing each one, I could think of people I know, and even myself sometimes, who fit those patterns. What about you listening? As you think about your own experiences, or maybe people you know, do any of these archetypes stand out? It's a good reminder that everyone experiences imposter syndrome a little differently.
Definitely. Figuring out which of these archetypes you relate to most can be a good starting point to understand how imposter syndrome affects your thoughts and actions. Now let's get into where these feelings actually come from. The sources you sent agree that imposter syndrome isn't usually caused by just one thing.
Right, it sounds like there's a whole mix of things involved. What are some of the things in someone's personality that might make them more likely to feel this way?
Well, some personality traits definitely play a role. Your sources mentioned neuroticism, which is basically a tendency to experience negative emotions more easily and being prone to anxiety. These can make someone more vulnerable to feeling inadequate. And people who struggle with low self-esteem and don't believe in themselves are obviously going to be more susceptible to these feelings. We've already talked about perfectionism, but it's important to remember that it's both a symptom and a cause of imposter syndrome, always pushing you to reach standards that are impossible. And of course, fear of failure and even that weird fear of success because of the higher expectations that come with it can all contribute to this cycle of self-doubt. A really big issue here is the difficulty in believing good things about yourself, even when you have proof. It's like there's a wall in your mind that stops positive information from sinking in and changing how you see yourself.
It's like a mental shield deflecting any evidence that might contradict that belief that you're not good enough. What about how someone was raised? Do childhood experiences and family dynamics have anything to do with developing imposter syndrome?
Absolutely. Your sources highlight how early experiences in family life can really set the stage for these feelings to develop. Growing up where academic or professional success was super important or where parents had really high, often unrealistic expectations can make you feel like you'll never be good enough. And if a child experiences inconsistent praise and criticism, it can make them unsure about their worth and abilities. Also, being constantly compared to siblings, especially if one is labeled as the smart one or the successful one, can make the other siblings feel inadequate for their whole lives. And probably the most important thing is, if a child learns that their worth depends on what they achieve, and always being right, making mistakes, or not knowing something can trigger really strong feelings of being a fraud. These early messages can be incredibly powerful and stay with you for a long time, often working beneath the surface without you even realizing it.
It's incredible how these early messages can shape us so profoundly, impacting how we view ourselves for years to come. It really makes you think about the long-term effects of those formative years. But it's not all about individual psychology and upbringing, right? What about the influence of society and the environment we live in? How do those factors contribute to this?
Oh, the broader societal and environmental context is hugely important. Think about highly competitive work environments where you're constantly comparing yourself to others, and success is narrowly defined. These can definitely make feelings of inadequacy worse and feed imposter syndrome. Similarly, if you don't see people like yourself in your field in terms of race, gender, background, it can make you feel like you don't belong, which can really contribute to imposter syndrome. Workplace cultures that punish mistakes or create a climate of constant judgment also play a role. Your sources also talk about systemic biases and discrimination, especially against women and minorities. These external barriers add to the pressure to constantly prove yourself, making those feelings of being an imposter even stronger. And of course, we can't forget about social media. It's full of unrealistic, carefully curated images of success, which makes people compare themselves to others' highlight reels and feel inadequate. Finally, this idea of imposterization is really interesting. It's about how some workplaces unintentionally create environments that make people question their competence and whether they belong. For example, if a company only celebrates perfection and any mistake is a big deal, even very capable people can start to feel like they're always on edge, waiting to be found out.
It's pretty eye-opening to realize that imposter syndrome isn't always just an internal battle. There can be really powerful external factors contributing to those feelings as well. So, with all these different origins and ways it shows up, what are the real-world consequences of living with imposter syndrome? How does it affect someone's life and career in a tangible way?
The consequences are huge, as your sources explain. It affects both your career path and your mental and emotional well-being. In your career, imposter syndrome can make you hesitant to plan for the future or go for leadership positions. That fear of not being good enough can stop talented people from getting promotions, taking on more responsibility, or putting themselves forward for leadership roles, and this can really hold them back. It can also lead to avoiding new challenges and opportunities for growth because you're scared of failing and having your weaknesses exposed. Procrastination and even self-sabotage can happen, driven by that pressure to be perfect and the fear of not meeting impossible standards. And that constant struggle to accept praise, even when it's genuine, just reinforces the self-doubt and prevents people from building real confidence, which is so important for success. It's a real roadblock to reaching your full potential.
So, it's definitely more than just a bad feeling. It creates real obstacles and can hold you back in significant ways. What about the impact on mental and emotional health?
It takes a real toll. Imposter syndrome is directly linked to higher levels of stress and anxiety. That constant fear of being found out keeps you in a state of chronic stress, and over time, this can lead to depression and low self-esteem. Those constant feelings of inadequacy wear you down and can lead to burnout and not enjoying your job. It's also common to experience performance anxiety and fear of being judged by your coworkers and bosses. And over time, all that stress and anxiety can make you more vulnerable to developing actual anxiety and depressive disorders. And it's not just internal, it can affect relationships too, because you might isolate yourself, have trouble connecting with people on a deeper level, and dismiss positive interactions. Lastly, that fear of making mistakes or not knowing the answer can really kill creativity and make you less likely to take risks, which are often necessary for innovation and growth.
Wow, it's like a downward spiral that affects so many areas of your life. But the good news is, your sources are full of strategies and approaches for actually overcoming imposter syndrome. When something's so ingrained, where do you even start to tackle it?
There are a lot of tools you can use. A really important first step is to focus on objective facts and evidence instead of those subjective and often distorted feelings of inadequacy. It's about making a conscious effort to separate your emotions from the concrete reality of your competence. Think about your past achievements, positive feedback you've received, your skills, your qualifications. This takes practice to actively challenge that negative voice in your head with real proof. Another crucial strategy is to acknowledge those feelings of self-doubt without being harsh on yourself, and then deliberately shift your focus towards more positive and constructive thoughts and actions. Trying to ignore those feelings completely usually backfires and can actually make them worse. It's about recognizing the feeling without letting it define your reality.
That makes sense. You're not trying to pretend the feeling isn't there, but you're not letting it take over either. What are some other practical things someone can do in their daily life?
Talking about how you feel with people you trust. Maybe supportive coworkers, mentors who understand, or a therapist can give you a new perspective and help break that cycle of isolation and shame. Keeping what some people call a brag sheet or a win journal A record of your accomplishments, both big and small, can be surprisingly powerful. It's easy to forget your achievements, so having a place where you write them down can help you see how much you've actually done. Regularly looking at this list can remind you of what you're capable of and the positive impact you've had. Actively reframing negative thoughts and challenging that inner critic is also super important. Start noticing that critical voice in your head and consciously work to replace those negative messages with more positive, realistic, and supportive self-talk. Understanding that feeling unsure and doubtful is normal when you're pushing yourself and trying new things can also help. It's not a sign that you're not good enough. It's just part of the process.
It's like building a case for yourself, gathering evidence that proves you're competent, and actively fighting those negative thought patterns that tell you otherwise. But we're all human, and it's hard not to compare ourselves to others, especially nowadays. What can people do about that?
That's a big one. Try to shift your focus to your own strengths and good qualities, instead of dwelling on what you see as weaknesses and comparing yourself to others. This can really help you build genuine self-confidence. Learning to see failure and mistakes as opportunities to learn rather than proof that you're not good enough is also crucial. This involves being kind to yourself, treating yourself with the same understanding and kindness you would offer a friend going through the same thing. Your sources also talk about identifying and challenging those unwritten rules about competence that often drives imposter syndrome, things like believing you should always have the answer, or that asking for help means you're weak. And try creating a new, more positive internal script through things like positive affirmations and visualization. Don't underestimate the power of celebrating even small victories and recognizing your progress. It reinforces the feeling of accomplishment.
Those are all really concrete steps. It's like retraining your brain and changing how you see yourself and your abilities. We talked about those imposter archetypes before. Are there specific strategies that work best for each type?
The basic strategies we've talked about are helpful for everyone, but knowing which archetype you relate to most can help you tailor your approach. For the perfectionist, try intentionally lowering your standards sometimes and focusing on the progress you're making, not just on reaching a perfect outcome. The expert can work on taking action and starting projects even when they don't feel like they know absolutely everything, recognizing that learning is an ongoing process. The natural genius should try to see challenges and struggles as chances to learn and grow, not as proof that they're failures. The soloist can practice asking for help when they need it and see it as a sign of strength and collaboration, not weakness. And the superperson needs to learn to set realistic boundaries and prioritize self-care and well-being so they don't burn out trying to be perfect in every area of life.
That's a really helpful way to personalize those strategies. Your sources also talked a lot about self-compassion. Why is that so important in overcoming imposter syndrome? Self-compassion is like a direct counter to that harsh inner critic that fuels imposter syndrome. It's about treating yourself with the same kindness, understanding, and patience you would show a friend going through a tough time. The key parts of self-compassion are self-kindness, which is being gentle and understanding with yourself instead of critical, recognizing that everyone makes mistakes and nobody's perfect, and paying attention to your negative thoughts and feelings without letting them control you or define your self-worth. Accepting yourself for who you are is also essential, knowing that you have value as a person, regardless of what you achieve or your perceived shortcomings. Forgiving yourself for mistakes and practicing positive self-talk can slowly change that negative voice in your head. It's about giving yourself permission to be human, with all your strengths and weaknesses. It's about accepting that you're not perfect and allowing yourself to learn and grow without constantly beating yourself up. What about getting support and feedback from people you trust? How can that help with these feelings?
Getting honest and constructive feedback from people you trust, colleagues, mentors, supervisors, can give you a really valuable reality check. It helps you see your strengths and accomplishments through other people's eyes, offering a more objective perspective and challenging that distorted self-image that fuels imposter syndrome. Constructive feedback can also show you specific areas where you can improve professionally, which, believe it or not, can actually boost your confidence by giving you a clear path forward. Having a mentor can be super helpful. They can share their own experiences, maybe even talk about their own struggles with self-doubt, and give you an objective opinion on your skills and potential. And it's interesting, becoming a mentor yourself can help you recognize and value your own knowledge and skills as you guide someone else. It reminds you of how much you've already achieved.
That's a really interesting point, that helping others can actually help you recognize your own competence. Finally, your sources touched on the role of workplace culture in either making imposter syndrome better or worse. What can companies do to address this at a bigger level?
It's crucial for workplaces to create a culture where imposter syndrome is openly talked about and seen as normal. This can really reduce the shame and isolation that people often feel, encouraging open communication and making it feel safe to share these experiences. When leaders and people in positions of authority show vulnerability by talking about their own struggles with self-doubt, it can make a huge difference. It makes the whole issue feel less like a personal secret. It's also really important to promote a growth mindset throughout the organization, where learning and development are valued and mistakes are seen as opportunities to grow instead of reasons to blame people. Ultimately, a supportive and inclusive workplace culture can lead to more job satisfaction, better productivity, and higher employee engagement. Companies can also implement specific initiatives, like mentoring programs, making expectations and performance feedback clear and transparent, and giving regular constructive feedback that focuses on both strengths and areas for improvement.
It sounds like the key is to create an environment where it's okay not to have all the answers right away, where learning and growth are genuinely encouraged, and where vulnerability is seen as a strength. So, as we wrap up this deep dive into all the material you shared, it's clear that this feeling of being an imposter, even when all the evidence says otherwise, is not only real, but incredibly common.
Definitely. And by spending this time really understanding where it comes from, recognizing how it shows up in your life, and exploring these strategies for dealing with it, you now have valuable insights and practical tools to help you navigate this.
Absolutely. And as a final thought for you listening, as you think about everything we've discussed, now that you've done this deep dive into understanding what drives those imposter feelings, what one small but meaningful change are you going to make in how you recognize and appreciate your own competence and abilities moving forward?